Okay. Jason,
All right.
it?
We're good, Jason.
Okay. Do you want me to start, Jason?
That'd be great. Thank you, Ed.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. It's so very good to see all of you, and I hope that I'm sure you all survived the winter storm. Just want to go over a little bit about our agenda today. Is we have a program update with Ray Maybe, and at from 4:25 to 5 o'clock, John Willis and co-facilitator will be doing a session on the IBR/CAG Getting to Summer 2022. And what are some of the components of the modified LPA? How do we get there February through June? Oh, here we go. IBA modified LPA, and then we'll we'll do equity and climate and screening. And what's next? Public comment and wrap up. And that is what we're going to be doing today. So as I said to all of you, welcome.
And thank you, Ed. And Lisa, would you like to run through a few logistics before we jump in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ed, for getting us started. My name is Lisa Keohokalole Schauer, and I'm one of the co-facilitators. I was unable to make the last meeting, and my co-facilitator, Johnell, stepped in. He is in a Metro Council meeting right now, and hopefully will be joining us shortly. So in their interim, I will get us started with some of the just standard Zoom technology protocols that we want to cover. So we have closed captions available in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow the link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. Next slide. If you're in the Zoom room, you have the ability to access closed captions at the bottom middle of your screen. You should see a menu of options, and if you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen, then click on the CC icon, and a separate window with captions will appear. We are really pleased to continue to have ASL interpretation. This is in an effort to continue to center equity. To make sure the interpreter is always visible, please right-click your video and select Spotlight Video. For those of you watching on YouTube, when we screen share, you will be able to see the slideshow, closed captioning, and the ASL interpreter. You will still be able to hear different people speaking, but may not see them. In an effort to make sure that we are as transparent as possible, we'll pull down the slides as often as we can so that you can see the rest of the gallery of the Zoom room and the members of our community advisory group. Webinar participation tips. We appreciate you joining by phone or computer, not both. And we encourage you to use the mute when you're not speaking. And if you have any technical difficulties, please call the phone number and we'll make sure to work with you to try and resolve those as quickly as possible. Public input instructions. There is an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today. To dial in by phone, we ask that you use the following directions. Dial 1-669-900-6833. We will repeat these instructions again around 5:45, where we'll provide the meeting ID, passcode, and directions on how to raise your hand after you're invited to speak, how to unmute yourself. If you'd like to submit comments after the meeting, we invite you to do that via email, info@interstatebridge.org with CAG Public Comment in the subject line. We are also open to any phone conversations. If you'd like to call, leave us a message. We'd be happy to give you a call back. The number to reach us at in Washington is 360-859-0494. In Oregon, 503-897-9218. And our toll-free number is 888-503-69 6735. We ask that you include in your written or your phone message the words CAG Public Comment so that we can ensure that we are forwarding all of those public comments onto our community advisory group. CAG member commitments and operating norms. So we review this every meeting. We really would like to encourage our members of our community advisory group just to continue to center these commitments, put relationships first, keep focused on our common goal, notice power dynamics in the room, create a space for multiple truths and norms, be kind and brave, practice examining racially biased systems and processes, and look for learning. I'm going to go one step further and just ask that in this conversation, we're really excited to be able to talk through with you the opportunities for how the community advisory group works with us to achieve a modified LPA, which John will go into a lot more technical detail on what that means. But the next 6 months are critical on this program to ensure that our community advisory group has an opportunity to weigh in. As you think about how you might weigh in, I ask that those of you that tend to lean forward with comments, maybe hold back and allow those that haven't had an opportunity to lean in, do so. Those of you that tend to maybe lean back and not say anything, I would invite you to try and perhaps lean forward a little bit more and tell us what you're thinking so that we ensure that we have the opportunity to hear all members of our community advisory group. Ed went through our meeting agenda. So the first up is a video. Again, we like to use this as an opportunity to kind of keep us all remembering what we're hoping to achieve here. Really excited to debut. It's Miss Michaela Williams, who is being profiled today in our bridge story. So with that, Jason, I'll let you take it away.
My experiences using the bridge, it's definitely one that's a very on and off experience. So it's definitely a love hate. My name is Michaela Williams, and I am a commuter across the interstate bridge. For me, the bridge is definitely something that affects me generationally. So I'm a third generation bridge commuter. So my great granddad commuted across the bridge back in the 50s, and he commuted from North Portland into Vancouver, where he worked for the Bonneville Power Administration. My mom is my second generation for bridge commuting. So she commuted from Vancouver to the Portland VA for 20 years. Unfortunately, she was commuting. She was a mother at the time, and I'm not at that point in my life yet. So she definitely had to make a lot of sacrifices for us. And then there's me, and I am the newest commuter. I try to take public transit to my job, but living in Vancouver, I take the MAX. And sometimes it can be really unreliable. I have to sit in either like hours of traffic to get across the bridge, or just waiting for a 20-minute bridge lift. So then it just becomes really unreliable for me overall. Someday, you know, my kids can travel across a new interstate bridge, and then when they do, they can always just think of me and the impact that I was able to have.
Thank you, Jason. It looks like we were a tiny bit off on the words and the, the story, but appreciate you being willing to film your bridge story, Michaela. Typically at this point, we look to our leader, our program administrator, Greg Johnson, to provide us with an update. Greg is at another meeting right now, and I believe that Ray may be there as well. So I am going to ask my friend John Willis, who's our deputy project manager, to provide a program update, and I'm happy to jump in here, John, if you need any support. But I think you have a pretty good view of what's happening on the program and can provide a bit of an update to the community advisory group.
Thanks. I'm honored, John Willis, Deputy Program Manager, honored to be stepping in for both Greg and Ray today. So I'll do my best. to provide the update on the program. But Lisa, if there's any time you want to chime in, I wouldn't mind. So great to see you all today. I'll start with an update on the bi-state legislative committee meetings. We are now in a pretty regular monthly cycle with the bi-state legislative committee. One of the things we're going to share with them in the coming months, I don't know exactly when, is the economic impact analysis. And we're committed to getting that to the CAG when it's complete. So you'll take a look at what the construction, the design and construction of a bridge like this means for the larger economy. It's a really important part of the story that we're sharing. We also, the bi-state has expressed continued support for the Interstate Bridge Program. So that's a plus. Again, being with the makeup of that group, really thrilled to see they are continuing to backing the project. Excuse me. And the CAG has stated that you'd like to hear about items from bi-state as we move forward. So we were committed to making sure that we leave items on the agenda in our update about the bi-state committee will be doing. We will be meeting with them in January, likely taking a break in February and coming back with them in March and April. So look for that on future agendas. Right now, I see Johnell's joined us, but we currently we have a Metro Council MTIP vote results. It's going on right now at the council meeting. Looks like Ray's joined us as well. Ray might want to step in. That's going on as we speak. That was a little bit longer meeting than we were expecting. I do want to thank Ed. I got to hear Ed's testimony. I did not get to hear Lynn, but thank you both for providing testimony at that meeting. That's much appreciated. And Ray, if you feel comfortable, if you want to take over the program update, I'm more than happy to turn it back to you. We just wanted to keep the show going.
Yeah, sorry I'm late.
No worries.
Thanks for keeping the ball rolling. Just came from the Metro Council meeting. It was a long meeting. The council definitely has expressed their concerns and desires in the program in a values document that they finalized and worked on with intention today. And so the program will be receiving that. But at the conclusion of that work, the council considered the motion to move into a PE phase and recognize the funds that the Oregon Transportation Commission has allocated the program, and did pass the resolution, I think 5-1. So it wasn't a resounding support vote. While the numbers show it, there were concerns expressed, and we will continue to work with them and our other partners to address their concerns. We take those seriously and share the values that they've expressed. So we look forward to that, and I do thank Ed Washington for coming on and providing his perspective. It's important that we hear all the perspectives of concerned and involved citizens. So thank you. So I think I have the program update version of this, and I've got a few things to share. And I'll step through those here with you this evening. Actually, this afternoon, sorry, it's been a long day. One, I think I'd like to thank this advisory group for the work you've done to encourage the community to take our survey. And I want to thank those on the group who did take the survey themselves. We had over 9,500 responses. That's really incredible. It surpasses the amount that we actually got from our previous engagement in the spring. And that's no small feat in these COVID times. This medium that we're meeting over now is not the best way and easiest way to connect with people. The help that this group's provided to extend our reach, to help make sure we've got people engaged and providing their opinions is definitely paid off. About 83% of our advisory group members took the survey. So that's a really phenomenal response rate. So thank you. And as we look at that feedback we received from that survey, we're considering that right alongside the modeling data and using it for our screening results to help differentiate the options being considered. So once again, thank you for that. Great work. Another area that I believe the advisory group has asked for is updates on what has been happening with the bi-state legislative committee. So I want to share a few thoughts there. But before I do, I guess I'd say those are I think aired live as well as available to watch at a later date after the meeting. So if you are interested and want to know exactly how things went, feel free to watch those. They're interesting and informative. But at the last bi-state legislative committee we held, we did provide an overview of our engagement with our equity priority communities and how we were working with local community groups to help share and get engagement. So that success and model has been something that we're very proud of, and hopefully will be a model for other programs. We shared an update on the study of governance structures that the program is working on, such as intergovernmental agreements, a compact, or bridge authorities. We didn't make any recommendations. We shared the work that we did around the different aspects and attributes of the different arrangements, and wait to hear any thoughts from the bi-state legislative committee. Oh, we're doing a shift change. Here we go. Great. So we are also shared a preview of the economic impact analysis. Programs of this size have the opportunity to impact the local economy from the monies that are funded locally, as well as monies that come from outside the area. And it's important to understand what that impact looks like, either directly and indirectly. And so we shared some high-level understandings of how those studies are done. And so we want to share a preview of what that looks like as we continue to finalize what that economic impact analysis looks like based on the conceptual finance plan. That helps us kind of get a baseline that will be updated as we get specific program estimates. Once we have that work, economic impact analysis, we'll bring those results to you here and share them with you and seek your input. Let's see, we did hear and continue support from the bi-state legislative committee, their support for the program to continue to move forward. And we're very appreciative of their involvement and engagement. Let's see, we also, on a different group, we had an executive steering group meeting earlier in December where we talked about the solution or the process to get to an IBR solution. And I think we'll be talking about today, the IBR solution is synonymous with a draft modified locally preferred alternative. And we'll talk more about that later, I believe. And we also shared the community outreach that I just mentioned in depth. Both really good presentations that I encourage you to look at if you are interested in further detail. We also had a freight leadership, a working group meeting with that we organized with the two ports of Portland and Vancouver to engage the freight community to understand their, one, to share with them our work progress, update on what we're doing, to make sure they had an even understanding of the work in the program, but want to understand their particular concerns and desires out of the program. I think it helped build on previous engagements we've had from the freight community, and we're looking at further engagement to round up what we've done. Let's see. So maybe a recap. I think, you know, in looking forward, as we look back at 2021, because it's now 2022, I think this community advisory group should applaud the work it's done in helping move the program forward, and the involvement from Ed and Lynn in leading the way, and Greg's efforts as well. Is we wouldn't be here without your involvement in work and advice. And I want to express my appreciation for that, and ask that each of you, if it's even possible online, to give yourselves a round of applause for your efforts so far. So yes, thank you. I think it's important to recognize that, and also important to recognize that there's much more work ahead of us. As we look at the coming year, we're going to continue to screen all those options, use the inputs that you've been giving around the performance criteria and screening criteria to look at those options and screen them down to preferred options, and then combine those into that alternative that will go into that locally preferred alternative, the modified version that I mentioned. That is a heavy lift for us to work through local boards and councils and our bi-state legislative committee through the first half of this year. And once we get to that point, the heavy work on environmental studies begins, and continued work on that alternative refinements. And so continued input and engagement from this group is going to be very important and valued. So I want to let you know that our work has been great, but our work is not done. I think we can feel pretty good about where we've been and where we're going. I think the CAG has had, our members have had a couple of questions, and I guess I'll lean on Ed and Lynn if you'd like me to address those a bit. I think one was the grade of the bridge, and if there'll be a discussion topic in the future, and the thought processes behind the immersed tube tunnel. So I don't want to use up all the time, but I want to see what you would like me to, how do you like me to respond to those?
Lynn, do you want to jump in here? You want me to jump in?
Not tracking where the questions come from. Is this just open mic, or were there questions that were submitted that I missed?
I think there were a couple of questions. Sam's got his hand up that Jason heard directly from CAG members, and Ray is one step ahead of us, ready to answer them. So I think what would be helpful is maybe Sam, why don't you share a little bit about kind of your thinking, and then Ray's ready to go, so he can answer your question.
I really appreciate that, and I apologize if I missed it in the past meetings. So basically, we received public comment right before this meeting about immersed tube tunnel, and we heard the one side of the story. I'd like to hear our side of the story as to why we're moving ahead with the preferred option. And so, because I think we have to, as community advisory group members, we have to explain that ourselves. And if I don't know both sides of the story, it is very difficult for me to fully
wait.
Just,
sorry, before we get into the content, I just read a 39-page document answering that. Was that routed to everybody, or was that just something I got? Jason, do you know?
I didn't get it.
Well, because I got through it and I was on like page 27, and if I didn't finish 39, I'd lose my place. So I I know why. Anyway, there's a 39-page document that answers that in great detail, but I will now stop talking. And I thought we all had it. I apologize.
No, fantastic. If I could get hold of that document, we don't even have to talk about it here.
So let me just jump in just real quick from a procedural standpoint. So not sure how, Lynn, you might have tracked that down. It is on our website. So
yeah,
it's been on our website for quite some time,
yeah.
but I know because so let me first just say, we want to hear your questions. And when you receive public comment, it is important as members of the community advisory group, if you have questions, let's talk about them. So I appreciate that you already had sent a message over, Sam. I also think that because there's confusion about where the materials are, as a member of the community advisory group, we also want to make sure we're pointing you to the right places on the website to be able to answer some of those questions. And then lastly, I do know that Ray's been thinking a little bit about the question around the ITT, and I'd love for you to maybe weigh in a little bit about some of your thoughts in terms of how can we make sure the community advisory group has enough visibility around that particular topic.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And I do agree, Sam, that you need to know these things so you can adequately respond to questions you're getting from your community members. But like Lisa said, the website actually has, I think, 3 documents that address our work here. I think the lengthy study that I think Lynn mentioned, there's a presentation, and then there's, I think, a 2-page summary that's available. So you can take the Reader's Digest version, and then if you need more, you can dig into the more comprehensive report. But so the question was, why are we not further considering that? Well, part of it is you need to look back in a little bit of history, I think. In the previous effort of CRC, tunnel options were studied and screened out because they didn't meet the purpose and need. And at the time, I don't think ITT technology was that widely used. And so the program wanted to take a closer look at this to see if there were any things we didn't want to miss or just rule out without thought. So we took a serious look at the ITT technology, which is being used across the world, is a valid technology for tunneling and using to produce different crossings. But they are definitely have sites that are more favorable to them and sites that are less favorable. And I'd say the site of the Columbia River is not a favorable site for several reasons. One is we have a shipping channel that has to be maintained, and it's currently maintained at a certain depth, but the Army Corps allows and maintains rights to depths below that, even that we don't believe was considered in the proposals that are included in the public commentary, which drives the depth of that ITT quite far down, which makes it very difficult, if not makes it impossible, to come back up at any reasonable grade and connect to the interchanges in the program area. That we bypass Hayden Island and SR 14 in order to come back up. Those are a couple of things. One is and also the cost of much higher than been proposed or purported. And the excuse me. The environmental impacts of this type of construction are quite immense. The construction technique that's used for an immersed tube tunnel is a actual open pit, and then you place the tunnel section and cover it. So you can imagine what that looks like across the river and on the banks of Oregon and Washington as you do an open pit for something that's as wide as you would need to handle the traffic the light rail and the pedestrians and bicyclists that would be venturing into a tunnel like that. So a lot of these points are developed in more detail, but we did conclude that the tunnel does not meet all the problems in the purpose and need, and presented to, I believe, our Vice Legislative Committee and Executive Steering Group that we are not looking further at that option.
I'll also just give a hint to anyone who goes and looks that the full report is quite instructive and it's signed off on by dozens of engineers, but I would read the first few pages and then go to the last few pages. And you're absolutely right. I got it off of I think it was the CAG website, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the burden of assessing things is much higher on us than it is on others. Others can propose ideas that they don't necessarily have to stand behind or justify, but the transparency and work that we have to do to ensure that we are making sound decisions is much higher. And that's why we put the effort into this. We did engage engineers that have designed these types of projects before to get their professional opinions and input on this report. And these were folks that have designed projects that have been successful. So it wasn't as if we had people that are just favoring bridges. They actually understand and promote this type of solution when it's right.
Thank you. And then I think, Jana, your hand is up.
Thank you. And I will apologize to all of you. I am traveling today and my computer will not sign in. So I'm just talking to you over my phone. So no picture. But I did want to mention that the prospect of a tunnel would create some very strong concerns for the freight industry. I-5 is a major commerce route, and tunnels often restrict the kind of commodities that can move through them. And so I think the freight industry would have been very concerned if you were seriously considering looking at a tunnel, because it would potentially restrict a number of products that are regularly carried up and down I-5. I'm not talking about dangerous products. I'm just talking about things that we use every day, but may have a hazardous materials placarding with them. So like automotive batteries, for example. So I appreciate the investigation into that, but I am pleased to see that that's not the direction that this group is going to move forward with. So thank you.
Thank you. Tom Hickey and then Sam.
Thanks. More kind of broadly, I wonder, when we talk about something not meeting the purpose and need, can we get more subtle about that? I mean, not meeting the purpose and need is not like a light switch, it's a matter of degree. And I assume that these different options are scored on a number of different elements that create an aggregate score for whether it meets the purpose and need. And so if you can use a little more detail and say, you know, it reaches a 90% score, or it reaches a 4% score, or something like that, that would give us a little better insight into how badly it misses the target, that would be very useful as well.
Yeah, Tom, I guess I'd say I'd propose, if we want to really dig in, that we come back with a more thorough presentation on the findings and work. But when we look at purpose and need in the problem statements, the options that move forward, or alternatives that move forward, have to meet every one of those. If they don't meet one, then they're screened out. So, and that's in this case as well.
And that distinguishes from the other process where they are in fact scored.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Sam? Sam, Kim, did you?
Sorry,
you don't want to talk?
I'm just talking away and I forgot to unmute. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I actually skimmed through all 3 documents. Thank you so much for pointing out that they are actually there. Some are marked for internal use only. So I wasn't sure if I was supposed to read them or not, but I read them. So the 2 things stand out for me. And this is to the earlier question about, hey, how does the scoring look and so forth. The 4.4% grade and 4.5% grade, and then $3 billion. To me, those are pretty compelling reasons why this was not a viable option. So I'm going to read more so that I will have greater background into this. But thank you. It was my fault that I didn't know these existed.
Not at all. Not at all. Good question.
So there's a lot of documents. So it's actually finding them that can be the trick. So that's another thing that we can use some of the staff to help us answer those questions. So I think that was a great example of having them help us. So thank you, Sam, for raising that. Tom Gentry.
What you just said concerned me when you said that it had to meet every one of the criteria. And I just wonder who is making that decision. The reason I asked that question is the number 1 criteria after seismic for the CRC and this one has been the transit time. And yet the 4 solutions that you propose now, when the bi-state and the executive group have asked for how much time have improved, every time the answer has been, we don't know. It might be 1 minute, we don't know. And so we've already eliminated a lot of things, yet I don't see where they meet that criteria unless you are judging it on some kind of scale or something. Would you please tell me how that works?
Well, I think, Tom, if you look at the problem statements, congestion is one of the problems that I think you mentioned. And congestion can be solved in different ways. And I think we're looking at multiple ways to solve that congestion. We have providing options, either through high capacity transit or active transportation for those who can or need to walk, bike, or roll. And then also improving our connections, the on and off ramps, and for safer and more efficient ingress on and off the highway. And then looking at smart technology as well to provide more reliable travel times. I can't say that, like you said, the travel times depend on what the end project's going to be. But I think we're really looking at focusing on reliable travel times. So those who need to get from one point to another know and can rely on the ability to travel and get there when they need to.
I've been with this for a year now, and I promise I've studied and understand a lot of the things you just said.
Mm-hmm.
But with the limitation, the project's geographic limitation, you're not going to be able to increase the transit, you're not going to improve the transit time very much unless you move it elsewhere, as we've been told before. And when you limit it to 3 through lanes in each direction, which is what it has, I think that we have limited our ability to respond to the public with transit times that you can expect, which you can now, actually. You can time yourself pretty good, depending on what time of day. But we are not going to be improving it, even though we're adding tolling, these things. So I am concerned that we are not answering the public, the bi-state and the executive group and the CAG on addressing this transit issue. And I understand all those other things. Believe me, I've read them. And that is still my major concern. Thank you.
Lynn, if I may, I wonder if there was a presentation to the executive steering group on those design elements that don't meet purpose and need. And I wonder if something similar could be useful for a community advisory group. I think the points that are being made here are worthwhile for us to spend time on. We hadn't anticipated in this meeting that we would spend time exploring all of these different kind of components that I think are really important. And I'm curious if that should be something that we prioritize for the next meeting. So I'll turn it back to you, Lynn, but just curious if that kind of a presentation might be helpful. And it seems like there's quite a few questions, if that might be something that we can link together.
I think so, if I can just see nods, but my sense is because we're not all in this and we did get some presentations on some elements of this, but I think a refresh about purpose and need, what doesn't meet purpose and need, you know, the choices that we have going forward, I think that would be very helpful. But I'm looking at the screens. Can you just nod for a minute? I have to change screens so that or shake your head if that's not something. Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Thank you. I'm going to screen 2. More nods. I'm not seeing any shakes. Okay. All right, Lisa, thank you very much. Really helpful. And then before you made that comment, Michaela had her hand up. So maybe we can take that last comment before we move to the next item. So Michaela, if you would.
Yeah, for me, I think when I think about reliability, the things that really point out to me in like the current bridge design is reliability. I can't ever like plan out a bridge lift. I don't know when it's coming. I could be living 20 minutes from the bridge and I'll get onto SR 500 and the sign will tell me, and I didn't have any time to plan for that. And accidents on the bridge. That is another huge thing that like I have been at the front of the line when there's a fender bender, and it's crazy to watch like the swarm of people that like work to get this issue off of the bridge as soon as possible. It's literally like a swarm of people that just like come in, pick up the vehicle, take the vehicle off the bridge and go. And I think that when it comes to reliability and timeliness, I think it has a lot less to do with me getting to work faster rather than me just knowing that I'm gonna get to work at about the same time every day. And like, I can't predict that under the current circumstances. So bridge lifts, accidents on the bridge, like not adequate emergency lanes in case, you know, an accident does happen, because they do, we're all human. And so I think that those are really the things that I'm looking for when it comes to my reliability on the bridge. And then, I mean, congestion, it also kind of plays into that. Like a 10 a.m. bridge lift will suffer commuters well into rush hour. And so like you see those effects throughout the rest of your daily commute. And so those are the kind of things that as just an everyday bridge commuter, like I'm looking to eliminate to increase reliability when taking that route, is just an opportunity for safety so that people can just get their vehicles off the bridge and we can continue to flow traffic through and not have to stop for a 20-minute bridge lift. So that's kind of all I had. I just wanted.
No, and if I may, that's super important. That's why we wanted a lot of bridge users, right? Because speaking to reliability is related to, but not the same as congestion. So thank you. Ed, did you want to speak or? Your hand is up and your mute is on. So
okay.
There you go.
Ray, with regards to the question that Michaela just raised, do you have knowledge of how those kinds of things are handled in other cities like San Francisco, you know, big cities that have a lot of, how do they handle those? How would they handle that in those cities, or do they?
So I think she mentioned quite a few things. Which ones are you talking about?
Mostly the wrecks, and knowing, you know, if you're there at 10 o'clock, you're messed up for the rest of the day. So I'm just curious, are we unique in the fact that we don't do it here?
Well, no, I think we do have incident response, but the things that you see on this program, like she mentioned, on the current bridge actually, is bridgeless. And so they don't have those in California. So they're hung up by that backup. And the short on and off ramps that exist in this corridor that are contributors to accident rates and slowing things down, they don't have those either. And what you'll see in today's modern projects is those safety shoulders that allow for disabled vehicles to get out of the traveled way and allow travel to continue. And then lastly, there are incident programs, and we'll be looking at that as well, where you can have people on call ready to mobilize in case there is an accident on the bridge, so it's cleared as quickly as possible. So we can limit those backups from happening. So it's a combination of things that help make that happen. Traffic measuring devices or flow devices, such as ramp meters to measure how many cars are coming on at any one time. They're not in place right now. I guess they are in Washington coming south, but having those in place helps as well. So a lot of it's not a one silver bullet, but it's many different things that come into play to help address that type of issue.
Thank you. And then Ray, if there wasn't anything else, I think we're anxious to hear John's presentation, but I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to cover everything you had intended before I move us along.
I think I did, and I'm very appreciative for the time that you've allowed me today, and I'm looking forward to John's presentation as well.
I think the challenge is we'd all like a Vulcan mind meld and just learn everything about everything that all of our team members knows, but the sooner I stop talking, the sooner John can get to work on that. So John, if you'll start us off, that'd be great. Thank you.
Did you want me to get to work on the presentation or the Vulcan mind meld?
I heard you're a really good multitasker, so how about both?
Okay. I want to do a little bit of an intro into where we've been and where we're headed. Just an update from when we last met. Excuse me. So thanks for the slides, Jason. And I guess thanks, Ray, also for bailing me out. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll just give you all a quick update on where we are with the schedule. Maybe you've seen this before. We keep going back to reminding ourselves where we've been really since the middle of last year, which was taking that purpose and need that we spoke to, which is essentially been modified or added on to with a set of desired outcomes for program level performance measures and design option screening criteria. That's the framework of how we're going to take a look at all of the changes that we've seen since the 2013 locally preferred alternative that was in the previous planning effort. In responding to changes since 2013, I apologize for the frog in my throat, we've developed a list of preliminary design options that are responsive to those changes. We shared that with this group last year, at the end of last year. We reached a concurrence with our executive steering group to move forward with our plan to evaluate those design options against those criteria and the desired outcomes. And I'll talk a little bit more about what's about to come and hit the team and all of our advisory groups. A lot of information. It's going to be really interesting. We'll have a conversation about that in just a little bit here. So in November and December, our team put their heads down and started evaluating all of the options that were approved to look at against all of those criteria. So that's where we've been. As we turn the corner into 2022, we're going to spend the next 6 months developing, excuse me, that locally preferred, modified locally preferred alternative. That's also been called the IBR solution in the past, and as Ray mentioned, those are synonymous. We are hoping to get continued resolution on program elements and then ultimately a stitched together program recommendation this spring with the desire to get to consensus, regional consensus on what we are going to move forward in the environmental process by June of 2022. So that's just 6 short months away. That modified LPA to get there, we are going to have to take all of the technical work our team's doing. We're being asked to look at additional modeling data analysis as the results come out of our evaluation. People are asking about sensitivity and other scenarios, and that allows us to provide more answers to questions that are out there. We're also getting alignment with our partner agencies. We have a total of 8 partner agencies, as you know, that are providing input on this project, including we just went through a process with Metro that's informing how we're moving forward. And then most importantly, the community engagement, of which that comes all up into a nice bow here with this group. So let me go to the next slide. This is a recap. It's not the detail that you saw last month, or I'm trying to remember when we shared this, but these are the options that our team is looking at. And this list will play an important role in our discussion we're going to have in just a few moments. But as a reminder, we looked at transit mode, reviewing a variety of light rail transit, bus rapid transit, and even a bus rapid transit, light rail transit hybrid option. It's important to note that all of those options include bus on shoulder. These are the current express buses that C-Tran is running across the bridge. Those are not only part of all of those options, but we're looking at just a bus on shoulder option on its own. We're looking at Hayden Island and Marine Drive interchange. And the reason we've looked at those together, like in a lot of places on this program, the interchanges are so close together that you can't look at one without another. So for this set of options, we looked at Hayden Island with a full interchange, north-south, all options of getting on and off I-5. We looked at Hayden Island with a partial interchange to and from the north, and we looked at an option with no interchange on Hayden Island. Each of those options has impacts on the Marine Drive interchange because they're so close together. Next up, we looked at Vancouver interchanges. There's a variety of interchanges north of the river, starting at SR14 and moving north. And that includes some look at how we make connections into downtown Vancouver. And these are generally also how the information will be rolling out. In fact, I'll get to that when we get to the end here. The bridge crossing and alignment will be something else we'll be looking at. We have 3 bridge alignments, one that looks very similar to the 2013 locally preferred alternative, as well as a straight alignment and a stacked alignment, which uses a different configuration of structure where we put north and southbound lanes of I-5 on 2 different levels. Those bridge crossings also have impacts on how we touch down into Vancouver. So we have to take a look at the interchanges in Vancouver as we go through that. And then finally, after we get all of this information, we can have a conversation about the number of auxiliary lanes, how wide the project is in different areas. Auxiliary lanes, as was mentioned in the discussion on crashes earlier, have a function based on interchange spacing, volumes, freight, and the design options that lead up all those first 4 bullets help influence and inform the auxiliary lane discussion. All of the options also include a replacement of the North Portland Harbor Bridge. It's been almost 10 years since the 2013 LPA, and a decision to replace that bridge because it's 10 years older and won't meet the seismic requirements has been made. More work will be done to identify the benefits and impacts of that replacement. And there are benefits in replacing that bridge. It unlocks some other options on the project. Active transportation improvements are also integrated into every design option with additional detail to be added as they're further developed. So I mentioned all this. I talk about the list. Our team is about to release a very large amount of data. We've promised, Administrator Johnson's promised to make this a data-driven project, and we hope to not disappoint on that level. That said, there's a bunch of information coming down. In our next section, we're hoping to get into a conversation with you on how we can engage the community advisory group to help inform that outcome. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. I'll pause there. I've gone through a little bit of the when and some of the what. I'm also going to talk a little bit of the how, but I should pause and see if there's any questions. Okay, well, let's go on to the next slide, and hopefully we can get to the point where we can get into a conversation. I'll quit talking at the screen here. All right, this is a little bit of the how. It's great to have all these options. It's great to have a schedule, but how we are going to get there is the most important thing we're looking at right now as we plan out the next 6 months. Excuse me. We have, I'll just walk through, we've got 6 big groups of people that are part of the decision-making, and I'll just walk through this real at a high level. We have the Bi-State Legislative Committee. That committee was set up by the governors of both Washington and Oregon. They'll provide oversight and guidance on the program development work. We, the program, answer to that committee, and the program leadership makes recommendations. To get those recommendations, we take a lot of input and oversight and guidance from a variety of groups. And the first one off to the right there is the decision makers with jurisdictional authority. These are our federal partners, our permitting agencies, transportation commissions, and the like. We also have an executive steering group off to the left. These are the agency partners I mentioned earlier. They provide regional leadership and guidance and recommendations on key program development topics. The work over the next 6 months is going to be involved at that regional level to make sure we have a locally preferred alternative at a region that we can then take up to a state and federal level as we define the project and get, to be blunt, to get funding so that we can build this project. The advisory groups, as you know, right there to the right, the community advisory group, providing input and feedback on reflecting those needs of the community, and the equity advisory group, which is providing a lot of input in the project, including developing equity-specific screening criteria. So with that, I'm just going to say we've talked about the when, the what, and the how, and I'm really looking forward to turning this over to Lisa and Johnell to engage in a conversation on how we support how this group here supports the next 6 months in making that recommendation along with our program to the executive steering group. So I'll pause, see if there's any questions. If there's not, I'll turn it over to Lisa and Johnell, who I believe have the next portion of the project for the agenda. Thank you for your time.
Can take down the slides.
Okay, so we have spent time talking quite a bit about what was formerly known as the IBR solution, which is now known as the modified LPA. We have shown a lot of data in terms of what the technical teams are looking at, also referred to as design options. John took all of that data and design options and rolled it up into one slide with just a few bulleted items, but we know there's a lot more detail within that, and you have been part of many of those presentations. What we think is really important in this moment is to talk about how we can utilize the work that was done with the community advisory group to develop the community values and priorities, and to use that as a way for us to start to assess those design options and to be able to look at which of those areas we may want to go deeper into and which areas we may just want to stay at a high level. Given that we've got 6 months to provide input, this is a moment for us to kind of pause and say, what is it that you want to dive deeper into in terms of content, and how do we align that with our community values and priorities work that we've already done? And so what I think we'd like to do at this point is we'd actually like to hear from you. We'd like to do that through a bit of some live polling. So Jason, I know there's a couple more slides, and Johnell, please weigh in here at any time, but let's go ahead and pull up those slides. I just wanted to give you a little overview of what we're thinking about we'd like to do. So Just as a quick refresher, you may recall as we were going through last spring's purpose and need, vision and values conversation, that we were able to achieve a document that lives on our website. We will also send it back out to everyone so that you have access to this. And that document was the result of a lot of breakout sessions, conversations with the community advisory group, and then pulling together a 4-person subcommittee. You can really kind of start to see how the conversations led through Jamboard notes and meeting summaries, and the committee's input helped us to arrive at what those high-level community values and priorities were. And so that's what you'll see in that document. Again, this was done last June. So June 3rd, 2021. Next slide. What we're hoping to achieve today is to be able to start to look at those community values, recognizing all those values are necessary to assess as design options advance towards one recommended IBR solution. What we'd like to know is if we were to take those values, all 12 of them, and to break them into 2 groups, how would you rank those values in terms of what would you like to see explored in more depth, as we then contrast that with those design options that are a part of that high level IBR solution or modified LPA. So we have a poll that Brent and Jason can run. Happy to spend a little bit more time kind of revisiting each of these values, but the first poll question will ask you to rank your top 3 values that you think that this community advisory group should spend more time exploring relative to design options. And of the 6 values that you'll be able to rank, those include all modes of transportation to increase capacity of river crossing, centering equity, climate change, informed data-driven decision-making, cost effectiveness, and transportation facilities that reflect the needs of all ages and abilities. So if you were to rank those, which of those areas do you want to spend more time exploring as we look at those design options? And I'm going to pause before we start the live poll. Johnell, did I miss anything? Is there any other commentary that you want to make before we jump in here?
No, I think you nailed it. That's exactly right. This body has spent a lot of time developing those values, and ultimately we want to make sure that as the technical team is spending time bringing information before you, that it's reflective of the values that you have already adopted. And of those, which of these would you want us to go deeper on? They're all going to be integrated, but we want to make sure that as we're furnishing information in this very short period of time, we're really honing in on what's most important to you. So that's really the purpose of this exercise.
Brent, okay. Are you ready?
All right, so our community advisory group has the opportunity for those that are watching on YouTube to rank that first question of community values and to choose the top 3 of the 6 that I already listed. There's a second question. The second question is also around community values, and we're asking our community advisory group to rank the top 3 of the following 6: congestion, natural resources, cultural and historical heritage and resources protected and honored, economic empowerment, bi-state cooperation, and community engagement. So if our community advisory group will answer both questions and rank top 3 in each of those areas, then we can take a look at those poll results and go from there.
And Lisa, looks like people are still clicking through with their options. We have like 15 people responded so far, so we'll give a few more moments for that. These are always a little bit nerve-wracking. I don't want to rush anybody.
We can play the Jeopardy music if we need to. So.
Well, I don't know if other people had the problem I did, but I only got all the answers for question 1 and half the answers for question 2. So I had to actually expand my box.
Yeah, I just scroll down.
Yeah, but you have to do it. I'm like, oh.
And looks like we have good participation here. Is anyone else still clicking around? Raise your hand and we can wait a little bit longer. Okay, not seeing other hand raised, so we'll stop the poll now, Jason. Then I'll share the results.
Great. And for those who cannot see this, I'm just going to list these real quickly. Top priority under the first group is all modes of transportation to increase capacity of the river crossing. That was number one. Number two is transportation facilities must reflect the needs of all ages and abilities. And then the or I guess number two actually was informed data driven decision-making process. Number three was transportation facilities must reflect the needs of all ages and abilities. So very informative there. And then for the second cluster of questions, top priority, congestion, 83%. Second is bi-state cooperation. And then third is economic empowerment. So very, very informative. So this will be utilized as a guide line and guardrails as we kind of move forward. And I see that we have a couple of questions. We can take the poll down here. Dina, and I think I may have saw a question from Martha as well. Dina?
I didn't see the results that you projected on the screen. So
Oh. Is there a way for Brent or Jason, can you put that up so the CAG can see that?
You should be able to see those, Dina. If not, I can send you a screenshot as well.
Can everyone see those?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll make sure that we get this out in email as well. Great. Lisa, why don't we go to the next section here, I think.
Okay, so slide that's going to introduce another poll. We recognize, as I mentioned a little earlier, there's a lot of data that has already come at you, lots of design options that we've walked through with our technical team relatively quickly. And we're interested in understanding if you were to rank the areas that we are trying to achieve regional consensus on that will make its way through our environmental process in June, which of these design areas would you like to spend more time talking about? So with that, if you could throw the slide back up on the screen so that we can just run through those one more time, and then we will go ahead and do the poll. But I see my friend John just raised his hand. So John, do you want to clarify what I may have just said?
No, that was perfect. Now that's on the screen, it's great. I just, I realize we take very complex parts of this project and put them into 2 or 3 word categories. So I was just going to pause and say, if anybody had any questions about what that included, I'd be more than happy to elaborate.
Great.
And just to add additional commentary, these are what you're doing is you're ranking which of these options will CAG spend more time on. Obviously, if we have more time, we'll cover them all, but realizing that you'll want to have real in-depth conversations and working with our technical teams, as well as really assessing the merits of each of these options relative to your values. We want to get a sense in terms of how you might prioritize our time together.
Those 5 design options are transit mode, interchanges Hayden Island Marine Drive, interchanges Vancouver, bridge crossing and alignment, and number of auxiliary lanes. All of these areas will have gone through to that IBR solution modified LPA in June. So again, we're not looking at only focusing on one, but which areas would you rank? So we have a poll for you to participate in. So Brent, if you can go ahead and pull that up. If there's any questions as to what do we mean, please feel free to raise your hand and we can clarify. But if you could rank 1 to 5, please.
Can folks see that? Okay, good.
You may have to expand the width to see first through fifth choice. I'll add that. I know Lynn mentioned something similar before.
And I see Tom has a question.
No, I had first, second, third, and fifth, and there wasn't any fourth choice, but I didn't realize I could open the window.
Looks like we have 17 people responded so far. I think we had 18 last time, so. If anyone still needs time, let me know. You can leave it up.
Yes, Javier, I can't see I just see the page, but not the options.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Okay. I can work with you after this to see if we can't get your responses collected. Your Zoom clients may be a bit out of date, so they need to be updated a little bit more regularly. So Javier and Sam, I'll reach out to you after this, okay?
So we will caveat our results with the fact that we have 2 members who have not had a chance to weigh in. So we will assess that and then get out an updated in case things change.
You should be able to see those results now.
This is Julia. Same for me as well.
Okay, Julia.
This is Sarah. I also wasn't able to see the polls.
So we've had a few folks, was that three who could not see the poll? Okay.
No.
It sounds like 4.
4? Okay. So obviously not very scientific. So Lisa, you want to go ahead and read the results?
Yes, I'm trying to interpret them. It looks like there is quite a bit of interest in transit mode. And then it looks a little bit split here.
More people chose bridge crossing and alignment for second. If that's how I'm reading it, Lisa.
Thanks,
than
John.
the other thing.
The number of lanes.
Third.
Yep. And then interchanges. Hayden Island Marine Drive and downtown Vancouver. So this is really helpful and exactly what we were looking for. It's hard to cover everything in each meeting with only 2 hours. So it also leads us to a conversation about how to get information to you when you need it, how often we should meet, which will be later in our conversation. But that was very helpful, knowing that we did not hear from everyone. We will follow up, and then we will want to send out a revised poll. So Tom Hickey, your hand's up again.
Yeah, well, what I noticed there was that the 3 subject topics that are of universal interest were the ones that won out, the ones that had to do with the entire bridge and were not of local interest. So the Hayden Island interchanges and the Vancouver interchanges are of perhaps desperate interest to that side of the river, but are not universally interesting. And so those 2 topics got, I think, unfairly perhaps shortchanged in terms of the vote. And if you were to ask that in terms of interchange in general, or roll those data points together to have a discussion about the interchanges with equal weight to Vancouver and Oregon, you might have a different result, because I think that those are important topics, and I hate to think that they're going to get pushed to the back burner because because you split the vote between the 2 sides of the river, basically.
I think that's a really good point. We also have formed and activated 2 community working groups specifically dedicated to both of those topics. So but I have to say those working groups were allotted 2 meetings each.
and have not had the opportunity to dig into the details that we want to dig into. And if I felt confident that those working groups were going to move forward with a lot more conversation, I would agree with you. But sitting on the Hayden Island Marine Drive Working Group has been quite a disappointment because they've been shortchanged in terms of depth of conversation.
I appreciate that comment, Tom. Would you also say that the Hayden Island Marine Drive Community Working Group that you participated on had more in-depth information than the Community Advisory Group has seen on those two areas?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so we'll want to figure out how we bring that input in, and I think you've made some really good comments that we can take back to the program team. But I felt like it was important to also remind folks that we did have those working groups, which were made up of community business stakeholders that are in both those areas as well. So
yeah, and the deep dive needs to continue on those, and if it continues, then that's a fine solution.
Great. Johnell, I might just pass this over to you. I think really just what we just experienced with your comments, Tom, is really what we're looking for in terms of reactions.
Exactly. And if we can get the slide deck back up, we're going to just do a refresher as to how we make and deliberate on decisions. We are headed into a period of time, I think, that many of us have been waiting for. We're going to be rolling up our sleeves on a lot of technical detail, wrestling with these very vexing issues. Of course, if this was an easy challenge, it would have already been complete. And certainly I feel confident with the help of all of you, we'll get to the finish line. But just as a reminder that we have a consensus process. You'll recall during our orientation so long ago, about a year ago, we really had a chance to practice our card system that I'll go over. But just a reminder of what consensus is that participants develop and decide on proposals with the aim of acceptance by all, that including the input of all committee members results in better proposals that helps to address all potential concerns. It really works to foster a collegial group, resulting in cohesion and interpersonal connection. And it requires active participation in working through differences. Just as a reminder for us in terms of the word consensus, it's from the Latin word agreement accord. Next slide, please. The way in which we have been operating or operationalizing consensus within this group, you'll recall we used the same process when we debated and considered the values document that you all have adopted. Green card means I agree and support the recommendation. Yellow means I have a question that must be answered before I decide but can live with the recommendation. And red is I oppose the recommendation, but I commit to work with the group to find a solution that works for all. And so the purpose of this primer this evening is starting in February, you're going to have an opportunity of really leaning in to utilizing these cards as well as a consensus model as we really debate and provide good feedback back to the program team as well as to the executive steering group relative to these design options. So I'm wondering if we have any questions. If not, let's go ahead, and I think next up we're going to have Angela. Okay, Angela.
All right, thank you, Johnell. All right, I'm still reflecting on the poll results. That was really interesting. I am going to take just a little bit of time today to kind of refresh the discussion on the design option screening and really focusing on explaining how equity and climate considerations are factored into that screening process. So if we go to the next slide, this is a slide that you may remember from when we last talked about this in November. Just giving kind of a big picture overview of the screening process, as we kind of have three components that feed into it. We have the program level desired outcomes. You know, what do we desire to to get out of this solution. And then those are translated into screening criteria so that we have a way of understanding how well each design option ranks in terms of each of those measures. And then, of course, we have the design options themselves. So when we put all that together, and it allows us to consider each design option across those criteria so that we can understand which perform better on those outcomes and what the trade-offs are, and ultimately be able to make a recommendation on that draft IBR solution, or as we're moving to, as Lisa mentioned earlier, to the modified locally preferred alternative. Next slide, please. So this is also a slide that we shared with you, just a really high level example of a screening matrix where you can see we have the screening criteria down the left side and just some generic design options in the other columns. And so some of the screening criteria categories: environment and community health, the efficient movement of people and goods. So that could be vehicle traffic, freight traffic, active transportation, transit. And then lastly, there is an element for cost and financing. These icons or symbols that we show are representing that within each of these screening criteria categories, there are elements of equity and climate that are kind of just embedded, or I like to use the term infused, into those criteria. And I'll dig a little bit deeper as we move forward. So next slide, please. So again, these are just kind of the components: desired outcomes, screening criteria, equity, and climate that I'm going to be talking in a little bit more detail. Next, please. So again, just a refresher, the desired outcomes, I have a couple slides here, come from the 6 need statements in the purpose and need statement. So on this slide, you see the first 3: travel, demand, and congestion, freight movement, public transportation. I won't read the sub bullets here on desired outcomes, but just kind of fleshing out what we mean by, for example, what are the outcomes that we want to get from freight movement and public transportation? The second, let's see, needs 4 through 6 are on the next slide. Go there. We have safety, our active transportation or bicycle and pedestrian movements, as well as our seismic vulnerability. So those are our desired outcomes associated with our purpose and need. We have a couple other larger categories for desired outcomes. Next slide. Those related to climate change and resiliency, as well as equity. A lot of these come from the respective frameworks that have been developed. The equity objectives were identified through the Equity Advisory Group, coming from their equity framework that they have been working on over the last several months. And then lastly, on the last slide, I know there's a lot of words on this, and I just wanted to kind of hit the high level categories. The last one is cost effectiveness and financial resources, to make sure that we leverage funding sources. It gets into also tolling and pricing strategies and so forth. So that's just a really quick overview. And so now I want to go into, if we continue on through the slides, thank you. This is just a bit of a legend here. I'm going to show you the screening matrix framework that we are proposing to use to screen the design options. And we have taken those equity objectives and climate objectives and kind of coded them. I don't expect everybody to memorize these, but so we have under equity, we have looking at avoiding further harm. We look at providing community benefits, providing economic opportunity, and looking at mobility and accessibility. Under climate, you can see we have quite a few here as well. And these are, again, just showing how we are thinking about equity and climate as we embed that through our screening process. This will make more sense as we get to the example matrix, where I will slow down a bit and walk through. So next slide. Okay. So here is just a very small excerpt of a screening matrix that we're just kind of zoomed in here. As you can see, we have our metrics on the left side, and we looked at just a couple of the screening criteria under the environment and community and health category. Again, remember, there are efficient movement of people and goods. It has a lot of the traffic and transit elements, active transportation, that I'm not showing here because otherwise it would be so small, none of us could read it. But what we have done in this matrix is shown, what we're demonstrating is how we tie these screening criteria or metrics back to both our desired outcomes, which is that second column. And I don't expect you to remember what equity point 3 was, but that was noted back in the desired outcomes so that we can specifically tie it to each equity objective or climate objective. We also have coded, for example, on the next column over on the equity objectives, that aesthetics, what is the user's experience over surrounding the structure? So if you're walking across the new bridge, what is your experience? And there could be an element of community benefit, as well as avoiding further harm. That's the CB and AH. And so this is just a coding process to make sure that we are really pulling through those equity components, and then in the last column, the climate components through each of our screening metrics. I'm just going to pause there to see if there's any questions. I've been going really fast, but I just wanted to get to really this slide and the next one where we start to bring in the design options. And I can't see if any people are raising their hands. I'm going to rely on others to help me identify if there are any questions I could answer at this point.
Doesn't look like there's any hands. There's some stretching and some in their heads, but no, we're right at that time, 5:30.
All right, I know it's what happens when you're like near the end of a 2-hour meeting, right?
You're doing great, Angela. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go the next slide, which again, I apologize for the small print. Excuse me, I'm really just trying to show the framework, so don't worry too much about the fine print in the data cells. But this is just what you saw on the prior slide, but now we've expanded it to show how we would actually start to screen different design options. So we've added 4 more columns. That you see right there, kind of in the middle of the matrix, is the 2013 design. And our engineers have some other coding in how they are noting these different concepts. But we have the 2013 design, which came out of the prior planning work. And then we have design option 1. So this is coming from our Marine Drive, Hayden Island interchange area where we were looking at a full interchange on Hayden Island under design option 1. Moving to the right, design option 2 is one version of a partial interchange. And then design option 3 is a second version of a partial interchange. And so this is just giving you a flavor of how this will look. So as you see, we have the screening criteria down the left side. We have kind of the coding of how it ties to the different desired outcomes, equity objectives, climate objectives, and then we move into actually providing data-informed scoring for each of the design options. And this is the data that's in there right now is just very preliminary. So it's subject to change, but it's showing you that, for example, on noise is we have 2 categories of sensitive noise resources. All these 4 design options had 0 impacts to category 1 resources, but to category 2 sensitive noise resources, we start to put in some numbers. You'll see 42, 52, 53, and the percentages, either plus or minus, for example, 26% is comparing it back to the 2013 design. So in the case of design option 2, it has 26% higher number of impacts to category 2 sensitive noise areas, which in this particular location happens to be floating homes. So this is, again, this is just kind of giving a flavor to how we are grounding in our equity and climate components, as well as showing the data that we will be measuring and being able to compare the different design options to one another. So again, I'll pause to see if there are any questions on this.
Looks like Martha has a question, Angela.
Great. Go ahead, Martha.
Yeah, I'm interested that you're comparing it to the 2013 design instead of the existing conditions. Are you going to be having that comparison as well, or how is that going to be handled?
Well, in essence, they are somewhat of the same because when we're looking at existing conditions, we're looking at those numbers. So again, let me just use maybe the last row there, the wildlife and habitat acreage. Existing conditions would be at 0 impacts, whereas you can see for the 2013 design, it has 6.1 acres of impacts. So so it's not specifically, the pluses and minuses are really showing how we are changing from the prior solution that was identified in the past planning effort. And that, as we've been working on this project, is it because we're not starting with a new project, we're starting with a project that progressed to a certain point, and we are now addressing those changes that have happened both in the existing conditions and the regulatory environment, as well as design changes, and trying to understand, is that going to be an improvement in the overall solution compared with what we had previously. So
does we have a decision of record, we're comparing it to that as opposed to comparing it to a no build option. Is that right?
Yes, but again, most of the no build comparison is implicit in this because a no build would no further impacts to wildlife and habitat. So it would be a 0. We don't have a column that shows the no build, but that was documented in the original environmental impact analysis. Are there any additional questions? Okay, I'll take that as a no. All right. So as has been mentioned before, there's going to be a lot more data coming forward soon. That table that was just up there only had 4 lines of screening criteria. We could probably multiply that by 15 or so to get a sense of the larger screening matrix that we will have for that particular location. So a lot more criteria, a lot more data to support and to help provide input into assessing those design options. And so how will the community advisory group be involved in screening is, as was mentioned earlier, through the polling. And why we did the polling is we really want to look at using the community values and priorities to help assess those design options. Have the CAG have an opportunity to provide feedback on the screening results, the data, and help us understand if we're capturing the benefits and impacts associated with each design option, and then ultimately be able to share that input with the executive steering group, as well as the program team. So that's all I have. If there are any further questions, I'm happy to.
I see Tom. I see Tom has a question.
Okay.
Thank you. So in your screening matrix, when you're looking at desired outcome supported or an equity objective supported, will you be scoring those so that you can tell the difference between one that really hits the mark and another option that grazes the mark but doesn't hit it so well? How will you distinguish between those?
Yes. So that is definitely what we want to understand is when there are differences between the design options is to really understand what those differences are so that we can talk about the trade-offs. You know, I can give an example of, you know, if there is one option provides more accessibility to a community of concern, but maybe there's a higher cost in terms of purchase of right-of-way, we're able to look at those trade-offs and through discussion determine, you know, what is the preferred option for the program. And if we're leaning into equity, maybe the program as a whole says we will take that added cost because it provides more community benefits, as opposed to just relying on a low-cost solution. So that's the tricky part. There's no magic that we're able just to tally up and get something that's output. It's going to take a lot of discussion across the region, starting with, you know, our advisory groups and our other community or partners, local agency partners, to talk through that. As somebody said earlier, if it was an easy solution, we would have already been building this project already. So I hope that helps, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. So it's subjective at that level.
You know, it's data driven, but yes, you know, you're comparing apples to oranges, and there's just going to be some tough conversations to have to work through that and decide what the best solution is for this program.
Thank you.
All right. I think I hand this over to Johnell. Is that right?
Great. Just want to check, are there any additional questions from CAG? And, you know, this might be an opportunity. We're a little ahead of time. Open it up for the floor in case there are questions writ large, questions or comments writ large. Martha?
Yeah, this isn't a question, but more of a comment. I think when we talked about the tunnel, and you provided links to this additional data about the tunnel option, and I get that, but I think it would be a good idea, since the tunnel thing keeps coming up in citizens not involved with our group, but in the general community, regional community, especially on the Washington side, it would be a good idea if we could somehow get that information out to the general public as to why the tunnel is not considered an acceptable alternative. And I don't know what that form would take, maybe newspaper article or additional social media discussion or something like that. But I think a lot of people on this side of the river still think the tunnel is a really good option.
And maybe since we have extra time, and if Angela is still here, she is our environmental lead on the program, and she could, I think, address Tom's questions around how an alternative gets the purpose and need more thoroughly than I could. So Angela, could you address that?
Sure. I will give it my best. I think the question from the conversations at the beginning of the meeting were about the kind of the pass-fail evaluation when it comes to purpose and need, which is a very typical way that a NEPA project looks at purpose and need. Is you come up with an initial range of possible options or alternatives for meeting your purpose. And it is a pass-fail for those options to, at minimum, meet the needs for the program. In this case, we have 6 need statements. Even if one option passes 5 of those, but fails one of the others, it is not a reasonable option to move forward. So it must pass all of those. That's why it's a pass-fail. Whereas once we get through that effort and we know that our range of options does meet the purpose and need, then we can do more of this comparative analysis that we're looking at on the matrices that I just presented, where we can compare and see which one performs better. Does that answer the question, or was there more than he needed to explain there?
I don't think you need to explain it to us. I think the members of this committee get it, and we have access to this more technical information that is very helpful. I'm thinking about members of the general public who don't sit with us and who still they need more information about why some alternatives failed. And I want to make sure that their concerns are at least given, that there's some way for us to get that information to the general public, because because otherwise they're just going to be pressuring their legislators to say no on the project again, like they did the last time. That's all. I'm not saying, I don't have a problem with anything you've presented to us as a group. I'm talking about information to go to the general public.
I appreciate that, Martha. And I think we do have a lot of outreach opportunities in social media, and perhaps we can summarize our findings again and point towards our resources on the webpage as a way to do that work.
Next, Tom, and then Irina.
Thanks. I just want to push back a little bit on the idea that the purpose and need is pass-fail, because when I look back at these items, there's a lot of subjective aspects there. More people can move through the program area, more reliable, more people have access, competitive with other modes. All these things are measurements that put things on a scale of comparing A to B, but they're not is or is not. They're levels of compliance to an ideal. And so I think that there needs to be a little more subtlety than yes or no.
Yeah, so this is more of a second tier screening. The purpose and need test was completed through the initial planning process. We had a few new alternatives or revisions to alternatives like the tunnel, like a commuter rail, and I think we reviewed those with this group, but I can be stood corrected on that. We have memos up on our website about those 4 other alternatives of whether they would pass purpose and need and should be considered further in this kind of second tier of screening. So right now, all of the design options that we've put forward so far, to the best of our knowledge, do pass the purpose and need statement. And hence they are moving into this more comparative scoring where it's more than just a pass fail. It's more of a gradation.
All right, thanks.
Irina?
Looks like Irina. Oh, wait. I think Irina's muted.
Can't hear you, Irina.
I had this problem earlier. My microphone volume was down to 0.
Can't hear you. Okay, while Irina is working to get her audio together, Brett, could you share with us if we have any folks sign up for public comment?
We don't have anyone signed up for public comment, but Irina, just double check your microphone settings on your app there. Yeah, we still can't hear you, Irina. But there's no one for public comment at this point.
Okay.
Johnell.
Let's go ahead and still give the public comment instructions in case folks were waiting to receive those. And Irina, if you get volume, just let us know. We'll come back to you. So if we can, Lisa, I think I'm turning it over to you for this next section.
Thanks, Johnell. I think I'm ready for the next slide. We have talked about the community values and priorities and the design options. We recognize not everyone was able to participate in those polls. We want as many that would like to participate. We want your feedback before we push those polls and the results back out to everyone. We'd like to develop an assessment matrix to evaluate the LPA design options against those community advisory group values and priorities. Now, this last presentation by Angela demonstrates the complexity and the gradation that is not black and white. It's not yes, no, it's not pass, fail for all of these different elements, which is why we believe it's important that we have community input and we have the community advisory groups input as we start to advance through the next several months. Given that there is a lot of content that we are trying to really work with the community advisory group on, we're interested in understanding whether or not members of the community advisory group are interested in an increased number of meetings. John mentioned a flood of data. There is even more information that's coming in. Our technical teams have been hard at work for months now. We're interested in understanding, some of you may recall we did a joint orientation this time last January. So this has been a year that we have been together, a full year. And that orientation occurred with our equity advisory group. As you may recall, the community advisory group is a subset of the executive steering group, where both Lynn and Ed fully participate as members of the ESG. So there are 3 groups right now. And so we're interested in Would you like to look at opportunities to combine with those other groups as we move information forward? The last comment that I'll make, which is actually the first bulleted item under the CAG meetings, is we deliberately moved up our CAG meetings to the very first week of the month in order to allow a little bit of offset timing with our executive steering group. And we're finding that it is difficult for us to make sure that we're ready with the content and that we're ensuring we have content that is moving through our executive steering group and our community advisory group at the right cadence and pace. So we're considering asking you if we could move this meeting 1 week later, which puts us 1 week closer to our executive steering group. As you saw today, we weren't able to send the slides out ahead of time. We're deep in that process of continuing to refine our work plan, schedule elements, and how all of this work and data moves through our process. So we think an extra week will allow us to give you an extra week with material, which is really the commitment we've been trying to make. And Sam Kim has his consensus cards, which makes me so happy that you have your green card up. So thank you. We will send out an email like we typically do and seek your feedback, but I wanted to start foreshadowing for you that in order to achieve the work that needs to get done over the next 6 months, we may need more from you, and we recognize your volunteers. So we're interested in how involved you want to be. Next slide. We do have a few of those additional advisory group meetings that are scheduled. Equity Advisory Group, January 10th, 5:30 to 7:30. Our Executive Steering Group, January 20th, 10 to 12 noon. And then we do have our Community Advisory Group, February 3rd, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. We will be reaching out to you to see if that meeting may be able to shift. We recognize everyone's busy schedules. That may be too difficult. We may need to keep it February 3rd. Next slide. Future CAG topics. So I mentioned a little earlier, we did stand up 4 community working groups. Ray mentioned in his presentation, we also had a focus group around freight. We've collected a tremendous amount of feedback on the design options that have gone before the community advisory group. And we want to be able to share that feedback with our community advisory group. So our communications team has been hard at work in compiling, analyzing, and assessing all of that information. They will be prepared to make a presentation to this group to provide that written feedback. And we think it's really important that we're sharing both the quantitative feedback that we received through the survey, as well as all of the targeted outreach to communities of concern, and utilizing our community-based organizations to help us with the qualitative piece. We have a transit equity analysis that we believe is really important for us to share here. So we'll have our equity team present that. It also will likely coincide with the fact that equity is an important element that this group wants to spend some more time talking about, transit and equity. So we'll have that presentation, and then we'll go into more detail trying to unpack each of those elements of those design options as Angela and the environmental team goes through that screening process. Lastly, we've heard an introduction to tolling is important. It's certainly one of the elements that we're looking at in terms of that financial plan. So we'll start to dig into that a bit as well. So a lot to accomplish over the next few months. Michael.
Real quick question for you. I know there's so much that you're looking at in terms of data, but as you look at the different alternatives for transit modes coming over the program area, will you be sharing anything that compares trip times for travelers, whether it be by car, by bus, by light rail, something that gives us data that relates to the travel time? I know we're focused on congestion, but also I think travel time is important through that program area. So I'm curious if that'll be available to us.
I'm happy to take that, Lisa, if you want me to.
Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, the quick answer, Michael, thank you for the question, is our models look at travel times throughout the corridor. I'll need to get back to you on specific transit travel times. Our transit evaluation criteria do look at ridership and make assumptions about headways, how frequently a train or a bus rapid transit will come through a given a given point on the program. So, but we can get back to you with a more detailed answer on the travel.
Can I follow up to make sure that I'm clear? You said
Yes,
you
please.
look at ridership, but is it possible that ridership is the choices the riders are making is reflected by the time? So to me, they're one and the same. Maybe I just was making sure I'm being clear.
Yes, we make assumptions on, we do make assumptions on travel time as it goes into the model. I'd love to have one of our modelers here to get a more refined and detailed answer. But yes, we have assumptions about the travel time. And so when you model the entirety of the program, you're able to, the best the model can do, take a look at how mode choices are being made based on reliability, excuse me, and time. Did that help? I'm more than happy to follow up. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And I see we have a comment from Tom, and Bill will try to get to you real quickly. And Tom, we have just a couple minutes left.
My question, Lisa, is on those 3 questions: change dates, number of meetings, and combining groups. How do you want us to respond to you?
Jason's going to reach out and ask for some more information from each of you. So it was really just a warning. Pay attention to your emails. He's going to send something out. So, Bill?
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up to the one. And John, maybe you can answer this. Does that time comparison also take in consideration what transit as well as light rail and other modes have on each other? Does it, like the automobiles might be slowed down by the trains going across the bridge as well as the trucks and those kinds of things? Is there some kind of a comparison there also? We are able to model sort of the macro level of how people are crossing through the program by mode. There are some post-model assumptions that can be applied to look at things like does congestion for different vehicles, like say a bus traveling through the area. Yeah, again, I think when we share some of the results, we can open it up for questions. I know there's some modeling answers I'm probably not smart enough to get to you, but I don't know, Bill, if I answered your question well enough. We do make assumptions at a very macro level to try and make estimates on how people choose mode, what the reliability and time is.
I think there's been several questions around the travel time. So I think we can take that back as a program team. And we've heard it a few times just even in this conversation. Yes. So I don't want you in the hot seat, John, to have to answer that. I think that we can follow back up again, because I do think that it's probably worth spending a little bit more time. So thank you for the comment, Bill. I just want to check to see that there is not any public comment, anyone that has signed up so that we allow for space for that. Brent, Jason?
Still no one has signed up, Lisa.
Okay. Well, we're right at 6 o'clock and we promised 2-hour meeting. So I think at this point, I am going to pass it over to Ed. I know there were lots of questions regarding the ITT in particular. And so one of the follow-ups that we will do, in addition to looking at dates and times, is we'll send some of the resources and some of the presentations if you have a chance to take a look at those. But I think there's been some really good ideas that have been generated here. So just look forward to some additional information from the program team. And with that, Ed, do you want to wrap us up? That was the wrap up. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time and look forward to working together in 2022.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Everybody, see you soon.
Thank you.